start my audio. Thank you all that are online for joining. Thank you all that came in person. This is our now kind of third annual hybrid rain garden workshop. It's really exciting to see a consistent number of folks interested every single year in rain gardens. And as I was saying earlier, it's kind of nice this year that we're actually getting some feelings of spring, ignoring the snow, maybe coming on Monday. But for the next 2 days, maybe you can start to envision what your garden might look like for the coming spring and summer. So as we're getting started with the workshop today, maybe we can just begin with some quick rounds of introduction. So I'm going to pass it over to Dan to start us off with introductions. Over there.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Schwartz, soil scientist with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District at Fairfax County. So I will be giving the last presentation of the day where we get some more of the nitty-gritty design examples for rain garden sizing, things like that.
Perfect. And then in the back of the room.
So if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer those, and I'll be talking a little bit more both on choosing a location as well as some of the plans.
Perfect.
And also, if you go through the list of criteria for where to put your rain garden, and you're like, well, actually, maybe I don't have a good spot for it, I will also cover other things that you can do that are not rain garden, but are maybe rain garden-esque.
Perfect. And I'm Rebecca Murphy. I'm with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. And again, thank you all so much for being here. Just some general housekeeping information. We will have a break about halfway through. However, if you need to use the restroom, feel free to get up at any point. There is a single-use stall kind of just out here to the left. And then by the locker room areas, there's more restrooms. Again, we will have a break in the middle of the presentations, but feel free to move throughout. We're also really excited to have a number of master gardeners here with us today. So I am not necessarily a native plant expert, so they're the ones that you want to be talking to about all your different planting considerations. We also have free native plant guides thanks to Arlington County, which is really exciting. So please feel free to take one. Otherwise, I think they do cost about $40 otherwise. And with that, again, just a brief agenda for today's workshop. We're going to start off by just discussing high level, what are the functions and benefits of a rain garden? Then Lily's going to dig into those plant considerations, where you might want to locate your rain garden. And then as she mentioned, if you're hearing this information and you're thinking, well, I actually don't have this space, I probably don't have this soil type, she's going to give some alternatives. Then we'll have a break. This would be a great time to talk to Plant Nova natives and those master gardeners. And then actually right outside there is a rain garden. So if it's going to be a little bit warmer out in the next hour or so, would highly encourage you to hit the bathroom, go check out that rain garden outside. And then Lily actually shared a photo with me that she'll show in a little while of what the rain garden looks like peak bloom, so we can get a little bit better vision of that. And then to wrap us up, we have Dan, who's going to be providing all that information about designing and building a rain garden. So if you saw my email with that before the rain garden tips, and then there's those sheets at the table over there. He's going to be going step by step into those considerations, and then something that you can follow along if you did bring your laptop or that type of information as well. So with that being said, can I get a raise of hands? Who's seen a rain garden before in their neighborhood? Wow, okay, that's impressive. Anybody here who has never heard of a rain garden before this workshop? Okay. Okay, we have one person online, and that is fine. We get like one or two every year, and I love the enthusiasm for something you have no idea about. But to start off with just a high-level overview, and I'm going to go ahead and hide these meeting controls so that we can see everything. Perfect. If you're not familiar with a rain garden, if you've maybe seen a rain garden before, but you weren't really sure what it does, how it functions, essentially, a rain garden is a landscaped area that is built to be able to take in and absorb water so that it's not running off of your downspout and then into a nearby storm drain. You're going to see a ton of different examples throughout the workshop today with various shapes and sizes. But at the core of it, you can see here this photo nicely, and then the photo to the left. What separates a rain garden from what you could maybe just consider a conservation landscape or a basic garden are that they all feature this depression that's able to actually hold the rainwater for 24 to about 48 hours. And let's see if I can keep going here. So going into some different functions and benefits, there's a lot of different reasons that folks might want a rain garden in their yard. So I'm going to go over what they're useful for, as well as some misconceptions about that. For instance, raise of hand if you've maybe heard that a rain garden can be built to prevent flooding in your yard. Okay, so we're going to discuss that as well. And we have a number of raised hands online too. That's great. So first off is kind of a key function and benefit that a lot of folks think about when they hear the word rain garden is that it's reducing the flow of water from impervious surfaces. If you're not familiar with the term impervious surface, the graphic on the left-hand side here is a great example. That's any type of surface that isn't able to actually absorb water. So think your rooftop, think your sidewalks, driveways, streets. When it rains, all that water runs off of those impervious surfaces. It carries pollutants in your backyard like pet waste, fertilizer, maybe you wash your car on your lawn, so auto fluids, litter depending on where you live, and it carries those into nearby storm drains. And so once it gets into the storm drain, those pollutants aren't then filtered out. They go directly into your local creek and stream. So rain gardens are instead able to collect the water coming off of your home from those impervious surfaces, allowing them to then soak into that depressed area and then break down more slowly. In turn, we also see that it's helping recharge our groundwater in the region as well. Another key benefit here of rain gardens is habitat. So kind of like conservation landscapes, rain gardens are really excellent spaces to introduce native plant species. And we find that native plants are better adapted to our environment, particularly depending on the region. So they have stronger root systems. They're able to withstand various environmental pressures within our region. And they also tend to attract better pollinators. So if you're looking for more bees or more butterflies within your yard, rain gardens, in particular native plants, are a great option. And in turn, they just kind of make your yard look prettier. So I think the photo here on the bottom is a great example of that. You're getting some black-eyed Susans. You can have some nice variety that Lily is going to go into. But getting into what rain gardens cannot do. So a lot of folks envision rain gardens being able to prevent or stop any flooding in your yard. If you're looking at your yard, like the photos on the left-hand side there, so it's raining, it's puddling a little bit, but you're finding that the water is going away within 24 to 48 hours, then a rain garden is a great option. If you're seeing these type of flood events, as on the bottom here, after a storm event, you probably have a more significant challenge. Again, a rain garden should be able to absorb all of that water, become somewhat dry again within 48 hours. Lily is going to go over some other options, though, that can help with flooding challenges, such as bioswales, things like that. So again, a common misconception, and it can help reduce some of those impacts from smaller volumes of runoff, but it's not a particular option for all flood prevention. So some trivia time. We'll have these throughout the workshop here today, and you can just go ahead and shout it out. And people online, feel free to put it in the chat. But which of these is not a benefit of rain garden? A, recharges groundwater. B, captures stormwater pollutants. C, serves as breeding ground for mosquitoes, or D, reduces runoff from rain or snow? 1, 2, lovely. Great job, everybody. So another common misconception is that people think of rain gardens, they see kind of that ponding of water, and they automatically assume, well, mosquitoes are going to breed in there. But again, rain gardens shouldn't be holding water for more than 48 hours, and it actually takes mosquitoes breeding larvae to grow 7 to 8 days. So if your rain garden is functioning properly, you're not going to have this challenge. So next, we're just going to go into some basic components of a rain garden. I'm going to keep this pretty high level because Lily and Dan are going to go into more detail into how this plays into planting considerations, as well as actual design and build, depending on your property type. So there's 8 key components here. First, inflow and outflow, ponding area, planting, mulching, compost, amended soil, berm, and then 2 optional components that I'll discuss as well, gravel beds and under drains. So the first key component of a rain garden is the concept of inflow versus outflow. Essentially, this means that a rain garden needs to have a source of water to be able to flow from. So you can see nice examples on the slide here. For most properties, that's just going to be one of your home's downspouts. It could also be kind of like a gravel drain into the rain garden. But in general, you want to make sure that it is downslope or downhill for that flow of water. You're not just kind of putting it in the middle of your yard and hoping that water is going to collect there. Most of the time, as I mentioned, the rain garden should be able to capture all of that water, help it absorb into the ground. But sometimes you do have a little bit of excess and you want that overflow after a particularly heavy rain event. And that's where the idea of outflow is also helpful. So this is a really pretty example here. You could add just some gravel, another type of like lower berm if needed. But essentially it's ensuring that your rain garden isn't getting too waterlogged if needed. I do like some nice examples of inflow. Has anybody ever seen a rain chain? Yeah, they're really nice. They sound lovely during a rain event. They can range anywhere from like 25 to, I mean, I'm sure some can go over $100. Who are we kidding? But some basic ones on the cheaper range. And these help slow the flow of water from your gutters. You can put them in the direction of where your downspout would be going into the rain garden. Again, that just helps with that inflow. A kind of funky example of a downspout in the middle there, but just goes to show you can get creative with it. There's a number of options. You don't just have to have your downspout going into it. And next is the ponding area. And essentially, this is just the basin that allows water to collect. And so that's created by removing soil from the ground surface and then building a berm, which is kind of those mounds on the edge of the garden. So the photo to the left is a great example of how the berm on the outer edges helps contain the water, making sure that none is flowing out. You can see the gravel on the end there. And so the ponding area, as Dan is going to explain, can be various sizes depending on your interests and size of the rain garden. Next is the amended soil, and this is where it is particularly important that you conduct a soil test. Look for your property's soil type before you go digging. The amended soil is going to depend on that. So oftentimes, this could be a combination of compost. You might need sand in there depending on your soil type. And again, that's where a soil test will help you to determine that. After you add in the amended soil, we typically recommend that you put a nice little layer of mulch on top. And that's really just to help filter out pollutants before they get further into the ground. And then 2 final components, and again, these are optional. Typically, we recommend these for either a larger rain garden, or if you're finding that you're having more clay-esque soil, it's not infiltrating as well. A gravel filter and an under drain can be helpful. So first, a gravel filter, as you can see right here, Essentially, this is just going to help with increased water storage. It's making sure that the water isn't kind of staying within that soil layer. And again, just helps it like trickle through a little bit more slowly. The under drain, as you can see on the image to the left and on the bottom here, this is particularly helpful if you have kind of clay-esque soils. Essentially, it's just helping water move through the rain garden, particularly if it's not going to absorb as well. So it's typically just constructed with a PVC pipe. It's pretty simple, but again, if you also have a larger rain garden, this can be a good option too. And trivia time again. So what is the component of the rain garden here called? Ah, lovely. You guys are so smart. Perfect. This is the berm. And again, we're going to want to keep all these components in mind when we get into Lily and Dan's. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lily. Make sure.
People want me to stay. For folks online, Rebecca emailed some of these resources out. But for folks here in the room, just want to make sure you saw there are a couple of handouts here in addition to the agenda. The Before the Rain Garden workshop. This has a lot of really key links and additional resources that are available to you. I think everybody got this online, the link to this online as well. Excellent. So if you want a version where you can click on the link in the document and not have to type it in, use that one. But this can help you see what's on there. And I'll kind of be referring to this one a couple times. And then there's this one also, the homeowner infiltration test. This is a great resource that Northern Virginia Soil and Water put together. And I'll mention this, but Dan will cover it in a lot more detail. But all right. So again, my name is Lily Whitesell. Folks online were not able to hear me. I work here for Arlington County. I'm very happy to be here with you all this morning. And I'm going to be talking about some tips for where you want to locate your rain garden and where you don't want to locate it. If a rain garden will not work for your landscape, after you look at all of the location criteria and say, actually, this is not going to work, some other ideas for things that you can do that will also help provide rain garden-like benefits, and also go over some great native plants for rain gardens, as well as those other landscaping types. And this is going to work. There we go. Again, so let's start with finding a good rain garden location. So there's a few different categories of types of considerations that you want to take into account. So number one, there's minimum distances. You want to have a minimum distance from your foundation of your home. You want to have minimum distances from trees and also any utility lines that you have coming through your property. Also grading considerations. So you want to make sure that you can connect your rain garden to that runoff source. Putting in a nice rain garden and having no runoff go to it is not going to help you very much. You want to make sure your rain garden is not too steep, not too flat. Although Dan will go over kind of what to do if it is a little bit steeper, and also having a plan for overflow like Rebecca was talking about. You want to make sure that you have adequate soils or what to do based on the soil type that you have. Again, Dan will go over that in more detail, but I'll mention some of the key components, and also make sure that you have enough space. So let's go through those in a little bit more detail. I'm not sure why there's a little green line in the middle of my slide deck, but hopefully you can still read it. If you need me to, go over anything in more detail, just let me know. All right, let's talk about those minimum distances. Actually, Dan, I noticed that we've got a couple of raised hands here. Do you mind kind of filtering through or checking the comments and making sure that? Slides have stopped. Okay. Thank you for alerting us to that. Okay, let's try to share, do this, share. I'm gonna go back here. They can see it now? Okay. All right, so this is the slide folks online missed, and this is the slide that we're on now. Okay, thank you for alerting us to that. Please let us know if anything else comes up. All right, so again, minimum distances from the foundation of your home. Let's start there. We do not want to create a flooding problem in your basement, right? That is not the goal of a rain garden for anybody in this room or anybody online. So what we say typically is minimum of 10 feet from your foundation. If the rain garden, it is a very rare situation in which you might have a rain garden upslope from your home. But if you have, for example, one situation might be if there's a concentrated flow of runoff coming from somebody else's property towards your property, that might be a situation where you might have that and you want to capture that rain runoff right as it's coming into your property. In that case, we want to have the minimum distance be 40 to 50 feet from, but typically what you're going to be doing, most homeowner scale rain gardens are looking at capturing the runoff from their own downspouts. And so in that case, you should be looking at drainage away from the foundation from your home. Outside of tree drip zones. So we do not want to be killing trees to be putting in our rain gardens, right? That would, again, those are two things that both help the environment and also on the stormwater side. So we want to make sure to stay outside the drip zone. So the extent of the canopy is usually the extent of the root zone. So if you stay outside of the tree drip zone, just kind of go into your yard and look up and stay out of that area. That's kind of a key location. Also, any kind of utility line. So if you have a storm, any kind of pipes on your property, you probably know because when you purchase the property, you should have an easement. Although in Arlington, that's not always the case. Sometimes we have some historic pipes that exist, but you also want to always call Miss Utility. So Miss Utility is a free service. They will come out and mark all the different lines on your property. And you also just want to generally exercise caution. And then again, if there are easements on your property, you want to avoid those. You check your home's plat if you're not sure about that. All right. Thinking about our overflow. See if I can move this without. It should hide video panel. What's that? The bottom one, floating meeting controls. All right, Teams is, I know Teams better than Zoom, but most people like Zoom better. All right, so for our location, we want to make sure that we are capturing that runoff from our roof, and we're thinking about our slopes and our overflow. So again, concentrated runoff, not 3 feet of flooding in your yard runoff, right? We're talking, we need to have appropriate expectations for our rain garden. If you have, 2 feet of, of basically flooding coming through your yard in a big storm, you need to take different kinds of measures. And if you're in that situation, we can chat during the break. Again, not too steep, not too flat, so that you can create a nice level surface for your ponding area. Avoiding floodplains and resource protection areas. So a floodplain, right? You might have a floodplain near your stream. A resource protection area is an area that has been designed to limit development in order to protect those stream and wetland resources or ponds, etc. And you also want to plan for more intense rains, right? As we know, there is always a bigger rainstorm. We had a nice big one just a week or two ago. So you want to protect the outflow and make sure that you have a suitable location to send that runoff. That's not your neighbor's basement, right? So be thoughtful about where you're sending any extra runoff. All right. Let's see if this one goes through. There we go. Skip one. All right, let's talk about soil. So again, Dan is going to talk a little bit more about different soils and things like that. Your rain garden should, as Rebecca said, your rain garden should drain within 24 to 48 hours, right? If you have very, very soggy soils all year round, that's a different kind of soil. You're not going to get a rain garden there, unfortunately, if you pipe your runoff to a location. And so, you know, if you have very, very soggy soils, a rain garden is probably not right for you. But I'll talk about other things that you can do. Your minimum infiltration rate from a perk test or infiltration test that you're looking for is about 1/2 to 1 inch per hour. If Dan will talk about different considerations if you're under that, but basically it'll include adding an underdrain. There's some great soil information online. If you're bored during the break, you can look at some of the information on here and find what your soil type would be. All right. Again, this handout shows a lot of the different mapping systems for each of the jurisdictions. Rebecca, did you already go over kind of who's from what jurisdiction? Okay, who's here from Arlington? All right, who's here from Fairfax County? Who's here from somewhere else? All right, oh, I know where you're from. Alexandria, excellent. So City of Alexandria is in the room. Awesome. Anybody else that I missed? Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for being here. Really appreciate it. No matter how far you came from or how close. And so you can see a lot of these different layers online, even if it's, you know, not a nice day to be outdoors, you can learn about your stormwater, your soil, your streams, resource protection areas. In some of the jurisdictions, you can actually trace the connection from your nearest storm drain all the way out to your nearest stream and where it goes to, which is, you know, your watershed. So that can be fun too. It doesn't just have to be work. It looks like there's still some people with raised hands. Everybody okay?
The question about whether they can get
The handouts, yes. And the answer is yes.
answering yes, that most of them are available
Online, exactly. And we can send out links to specific handouts as well. All right. So again, the last one here is finding enough space. So Dan is going to go through in very, very detailed way of sizing your rain garden calculations. And in some cases, you need to know what the appropriate size is. If you're just doing this on your own, sometimes, so if, for example, in Arlington, if you're trying to get a stormwater utility credit, then there's a minimum size, but you don't have to follow a sizing spreadsheet. If you're just doing this for the goodness of your heart, or because you just really want to capture some more stormwater, or give it a good place to go or things like that, you can also just do what you can do. So a typical homeowner rain garden is between 50 and 150 square feet. Somewhere in there is probably what you're aiming for. If it's bigger than that, please hire a contractor. Please don't try to do that yourself. So in terms of looking at where your downspouts are, making sure you know, what you're going to be going through is how much of your roof would drain to each side of your home when you're looking at a location. So for example, in this picture, we have, you know, you have the downspout here, and they were able to get, you know, the grading of this lot such that the runoff goes off the driveway and down the downspout and into the rain garden. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times our driveways are kind of the lowest point, so that can be kind of a challenge. Sometimes people will use downspout extensions or a dry creek bed or things like that to get your runoff to your rain garden. And just for the folks online, so what I'm talking about is you can see here the runoff's running off the driveway and down the downspout right here towards the rain garden. All right. So sometimes you just have to go with the area that you have available. All right, so let's go through real quick. How much rain is going to come off a typical roof? Let's say that we have a 30 by 40 foot home, so 30 feet by 40 feet. That gives us 1,200 square foot roof. And it doesn't matter how high or low that is. It can be 1 story, it can be 2 or 3 or whatever. But that's the dimensions of our roof. And I definitely didn't choose that number because it makes the math easier. Let's say that we have a 1-inch rainfall. Conveniently, that's 1/12 of a foot. That gives us 100 cubic feet of runoff. But who can really envision what 100 cubic feet looks like? Let's look at that in gallons. You're looking at 750 gallons of runoff. If you have a smaller roof, let's say 800 square foot, you're looking at 500. So a 1-inch rainfall is kind of a good starting point for assessing kind of what that stormwater storage potential looks like. That tends to be a pretty heavy storm. And you can also, again, there's always going to be a bigger storm, so you want to plan for that overflow as well. All right, so let's see what this looks like on an actual home. Let's say this is the rooftop area. There's our 10-foot buffer around it. We want to avoid our tree canopy. We're not killing trees to put in rain gardens. So these are all the possible rain garden locations. Also, credits for the slide do go to Dan and Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. So those, and we also probably want to avoid the driveway. So these are our different possible rain garden locations. From here, are we looking at uphill or downhill? So let's say assuming that, the front is downhill of the home, then you'd really be looking at the front area. If it's the opposite way, if it kind of drains towards the back, then you might be looking at one of these two areas over here. But here's our 40-foot buffer. All right, trivia time. We all love this. So this is true or false on either one of these. So rain gardens should be installed in wet soils in a high water table. True or false? False. Thank you. You've been paying attention. True or false? Miss Utility is a free service to mark utility lines. Yes. Flooding problems can be solved by rain gardens alone. Yes, we got a lot of head shaking in the room here. Thank you, guys. Rain gardens should drain into your home's foundation and basement walls. False. All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you playing along. Good job, and good job paying attention. All right. So here are some examples of different ways that you could locate your rain garden. Here is one homeowner who had this really nice garden bed kind of around the outsides of her property, which is a great way, to add some more native plants along the property line. So in this case, she already had this garden bed in the back. She did a nice little bump out for a rain garden. It's hard to tell, but there is actually 6-inch potting depth there, and actually was able to kind of dig that out, amend the soil, and put it in. And this is kind of what it looks like at the end. All right, here's another homeowner. This is the before picture. In this case, there was a lot of runoff coming off of kind of this back porch area. So was able to use the minimum distances in this direction, put in a very nice kind of out berm that was protected by stone, as well as kind of the overflow area here, connected to the downspout via a dry creek bed. I think there was also some overland flow that came through there, maybe other people's water, OPW, that was coming in through there as well. Planted it up with some nice shrubs, got them real small from Soil and Water Conservation District. This is June of that first year. And then 6 years later, this is what it looked like. So everything kind of grew up and was able to soak up a lot of the. Here's another one. You can see the berm kind of around the corner here. They had a very nice little ponding area here. You can see it does actually, sometimes it's hard to get this picture of it filling with water because it drains so quickly, but they got the picture. And then, continue to protect the berm with some native sedges and grasses and things like that. So here's another example where you had stormwater coming in. Actually, I'm not sure if that's in or out, through a dry creek bed into kind of the rain garden area. All right. So let's talk about, we talked about all these different location criteria, and actually my entire yard is completely shaded. I really can't do this. It's not going to work. What else can I do? Or it might be too steep. Or you might have really, really soggy soils that won't allow water to infiltrate in. Or you might be in a floodplain. So there are other options for you if you're in any of those situations. So you can do a swale if you have concentrated runoff, dry creek beds, even including check dams to kind of slow down the flow of water. And I'm going to show you some pictures of all these in a second. You can include terraces, especially if you have slopes. For those terraces, you can go use wood, stone, or biologs. You can do sort of what we call conservation landscaping, which is a native plant landscaped area. Some people call it rain garden light. And if you add some more soil amendment into that and really plant it up, it can help to improve infiltration and soak up some water. You can also add things like rain barrels, cisterns, or dry wells. If you're in Arlington County, if you put in 2 rain barrels, that's the easiest way to get stormwater utility credit. I'm happy to talk more about it. In terms, you also have an option, and Dan will talk about this more, to do a rain garden in a planter box. So here in Arlington, you may have seen, we have a lot of rain gardens in planter boxes near the homes. Don't worry, they all have liners to keep the water from going into the basements of those homes. And they drain out to usually a dry well in the yard. But you can also include sort of a rain garden in a box. So here's some pictures to kind of go through what that looks like. So again, these are some swales. The one on the right is a little bit more kind of industrial looking these are weirs. They allow water to go a little bit more easily through the center, but then they kind of slow down that water as it goes through. This is actually also a bioswale, so it includes some amended soil in the middle that allows water to flow more quickly through. Very sandy, kind of organic rich soil. This is another example of kind of a dry creek bed on the left that includes some larger stone along the channel and then some larger stone to provide a little bit more of a check dam, kind of like a terrace along a channel. All right. Again, now let's talk about, so terracing can be, if you don't have just a concentrated flow of water, if you have more widespread kind of water coming down a slope, you can also add terraces kind of along that slope that can really help to break things up, slow down the water, and reduce erosion that might be happening. So here's an example of one that nearby HOA did that really did a very nice job of combining, plants as well as some stone to slow down the water coming off the hill slope. Beforehand, this was like an eroded mess, basically. So they did a really nice job. Here's an example of some terraces with wood. Not all the plants in this picture are native, but it's a nice example of terraces, so we still include it. Here's another example of kind of adding stepping stones as well as some terraces in order to kind of break up the flow of water. These are something called coconut fiber logs or biologs. You can get a less expensive version at a lot of nearby stores these days. They tend to be smaller and kind of look like pantyhose that you stuff mulch into. But they can also help to break things up in a way that doesn't, where you can work around existing tree roots. That's the benefit of having a more flexible material as opposed to using wood or things like that. Again, you can amend the soil using a rototiller or things like that. As in the picture on the left, or just kind of do a top dressing if you have a lot of tree roots, as in the picture on the right. All right, poor drainage. Why might you have poor drainage? It could be compaction, it could be a dense clay layer in your soil, it could be high water table. Any of those reasons could contribute to poor drainage. I would caution you that we would consider like wet conditions or soggy conditions in your yard up to about 2 days after a rainstorm to be normal. So if that's you, and then after about 2 days it gets dry again, your yard is normal. Okay, you can just let it be wet sometimes. It doesn't have to dry out immediately after, when the sun comes out. Also a caution, the water table's highest in the winter. So if in the winter time, right now you're out there, you're like, oh, everything's so wet. It was icy and it was snowy forever. And now it's just, going to be wet for a while until things start to really grow and the trees start to take a lot of water out of the soils. It might continue to be kind of wet and muddy for a while. Again, normal. Another caution is you might just have a lot of water in your yard or coming through your yard, and you might have to choose your wet spots and your dry spots, right? So for example, this yard in the lower right here, they ended up having a decent infiltration rate, but they really wanted to be able to use this kind of grassy wet area that I'm circling with the mouse here. But it was the lowest spot in their yard. And so water always accumulated there. So what they did is they created a lower spot, kind of where the water came in, a little bit of other people's water here, and they created an overflow that went back to this sort of back line along the property line. And that was able to keep the water out of that grassy area that they wanted to be able to use. So you might have to have some area that's your soggy area, but you might be able to get it out of the area that you want to use. Soil amendment and woody plants can also help with low porosity. All right, trivia time. Which are the following are ways that native plants and soil amendment can help address common landscaping problems? A, native plants and soil amendment can be incorporated into terraces that slow down runoff and prevent erosion on the slopes. B, native plants and soil amendment can be used to improve porosity and uptake runoff in slow draining soils. C, they can be combined with a 6 to 12 inch ponding depth in a rain garden to collect and absorb heavy runoff. Or D, all of the above. Awesome. Great job, you guys. Thank you. All right, now we're going to talk about plants. This is my favorite part. But as a reminder, Dan is going to be covering more details on soils, infiltration tests, site suitability, and tips for digging and constructing your rain garden. Everybody's favorite part, as well as more detailed coverage of sizing and materials calculation. So don't go away. All right, let's talk about planting design. First, we're going to talk about soil moisture conditions. So in this picture, you can see the sides of this. Remember, your rain garden sides need to be nicely, gently sloped. You do not want to just fall off a foot into your rain garden, okay? And so that means that along these sides, you're going to have slightly different soil moisture conditions. Down at the bottom, it's going to be slightly wetter, and along the sides, it's going to be different. And then up on the edge, it's going to be different as well. It's going to be a little bit drier. Everything will get wet at some point. So again, this is just an overview image that shows that same concept. The plants in the lowest portion of the rain garden need to be able to tolerate inundation, then the side slopes a little bit less, and then the periphery a little bit less. There we go. And then also, as you're doing it, you can also check and see, hey, where are my wetter spots? And you can either change the elevation slightly if you want it to be slightly different, or you can kind of work around those. You also need to plan for plants for inlets and flow paths that can be able to withstand, right where that water is coming in. The water is going to come in at a pretty good pressure, so you need plants that can handle that. So for example, in this, you've got water coming in kind of from the storm drain out here, and you've got some nice grasses that can help to slow down that water, along with some stone. We always recommend that you use native plants. They are adapted to local conditions. They don't require inputs of, fertilizer or pesticides, and they also have great habitat benefits. This is a milkweed, or is it milkweed? I think so. Anyway, thank you. Butterfly milkweed, I think, is what it goes with. Sometimes I call it orange milkweed, just because it's a common name. You can make up whatever name you want. Asclepias tuberosa. Anyway, you want to avoid invasive plants. Please, please, please avoid invasive plants. We do not need any more invasive plants, non-native invasive plants spreading. Again, the definition of that is a non-native plant is introduced to this area, and invasive just means that it takes over. So for all the reasons on the screen. Especially if you are getting runoff from an area that might have road runoff or runoff from any areas that might be treated with a de-icer. You might want to choose plants that are a little bit more salt tolerant, a little bit more hardy. There's also all kinds of other lovely things that might be coming off of our roads. But even if you're putting, salt on your sidewalks or on your stairs coming down from your home, that's also something that you need to take into account. All right, let's go through some of them. We're going to start with some shrubs and plants that can handle a wide variety of conditions that can, a lot of times from sun all the way to shade and dry to wet. One of the reasons why you want to include dry conditions is because if your soil is draining very quickly, then you need to be able to handle dry conditions in between your rainstorms if it's going to dry out actually pretty quickly. So winterberry holly is one of them. There's actually some really pretty ones out in the bioretention in back here that have all the berries on them still. So we can take a little field trip during our break and take a look at that. We have Virginia sweet spire, also really pretty flowers, really nice red to purple fall color, a really nice, again, full sun to part shade, moist to wet. Chokeberry, there's both a black chokeberry as well as a red chokeberry. The black chokeberry tends to be a little bit shorter. Red chokeberry tends to be a little bit more of a overhead shrub. Viburnums, all the viburnums, all the native viburnums. Arrowwood is a great one. Possum haw, nudum is also a great one as well. Those are, 6 to 12 feet. So, let them grow. Really nice flowers in kind of the May, the little white flowers in kind of the Mayish time frame. In terms of our perennials, black-eyed Susans, the fulgida is that is the perennial as opposed to the annual that reseeds itself. So this is a nice one, and it will kind of expand over time. Joe Pye, there is Joe Pye out in here, so you can see it dry, but I do also have a picture of it in bloom and some other examples here as well. There are a number of Joe Pye weeds, really lovely also, again, kind of a small flower. Mountain mints are really pollinator powerhouses. I see these just completely buzzing with activity when they're in bloom. They are in the mint family, so if you feel like you might not have as much of a green thumb, this is a nice one to plant because it'll kind of spread and fill in the area nicely. It gets about yay high. Other great sun-loving plants include cardinal flower, ironweed, milkweeds, bee balm also in the mint family. New England aster is a great fall blooming one, and then summer phlox. Summer phlox, the swallowtail butterflies love the summer phloxes. So if that's a real key thing for you, that might be a nice plant to include. If you have a more shady rain garden, if you've, maybe part shade, although we're also avoiding our tree drip lines, smooth hydrangea is a nice kind of smaller shrub. Elderberry is a bigger shrub, although the more sun it gets, the more berries you're going to get. So choose your location. It does also spread. So that's a 6 to 12 foot. Foam flower is a smaller plant. Turtlehead is a nice fall flowering color plant. And ferns also can do very well in the shade. For the inlets, right, again, you have a force of water that might be coming through, so you want those plants that can handle that. Soft rush is a nice one. Juncus, it can also has slightly evergreen look to it, so especially in our area, so it can kind of keeps your rain garden green year round. Little blue stem, and then some of the sedges, so Pennsylvania sedge, creek sedge, tussock sedge all do very well. And they also stay green through the winter months and then die back a little bit in the summer. So again, that year-round interest. Use with caution. So I do have some of the Casmianthium latifolium. So that goes by river oats, upland sea oats, a million different common names. It does have this really pretty seed in the fall. just make sure that you're okay with it spreading from wherever it is, if you are going to be using that. Switchgrass also is in the same category of just make sure you're okay with it spreading a little bit. All right, a few design tips. Incorporate your rain garden into your landscape. Like the image that I showed earlier of the woman who had the nice, kind of garden beds around the edge of her property, she just kind of bumped it out a little bit and was able to incorporate the rain garden in. Define your edges, right? That really can help it look tidier, whether that's with smaller plants like sedges or stone, or even, some edging if you need to. Put your shorter plants in the front and taller plants in the back so you can kind of see everything. I really strongly recommend a simple planting plan. A lot of times, when we're out in our gardens, we're like, "Ooh, I just want one more thing, or just want this one other plant." If you have a simple planting pattern, it's going to be easier to tell what's a weed and what's not. Plant in clumps or in swaths of at least 3 to 7. It's also actually good for pollinators. And then plant densely, but also plan for those plants and especially shrubs to expand. And then remembering the 4 seasons. In terms of pots, plugs, or seeds, we do not recommend using seeds. This is an area that's going to get waterlogged, and your seeds might kind of move around, so your planting plan might not work out so well. You can start in a seed and then put the pot in the ground, put the soil in the pot in the ground. If you're thinking more economically, plugs might be a good way to go. And you have to also know that you might need to wait a little bit longer for your rain garden to mature. If you want a bigger container size, that might be, again, more immediate gratification, but then you're also going to be paying a little bit more. All right, trivia time. What different types of conditions should you plan for your rain garden plants? Choose all that apply. Flooding tolerance for the deepest part, moist to wet conditions for the edge, hardy plants for concentrated inflow, plants that cannot tolerate flooding for the deepest part. Which ones? A, B, C, D. A, B, and C. Yes, it's not D. It's kind of good. Very good. Thank you. All right, another one. What other factors should you consider when choosing rain garden plants? Sun requirements, part sun or shade and shade. Native plants for habitat benefits. Hardy plants that can tolerate a range of conditions. Plant container size, ease of maintenance, or all of the above. Good job, guys. All right, so here's some other simple design ideas for you. One of our local jurisdictions does a nice job with plantings of sort of 5 different species and kind of a set bunch. So 1 species, 2 species, 3 species, 4 species, 5, and they use these 5 for some year-round interest. And they do these plantings at schools. This is in Fairfax County. So the 5 plants that they choose are soft rush, bee balm, swamp milkweed, blue flag, iris, and then one of the coneflowers, the purple coneflower. So it's their R3 program, and it looks great. Here's another example. Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, go for it. Yes. I know some of us likes to take the pictures too. I'm definitely in that category because I'm like, otherwise I'm look it up. I want that one. Yeah, they're on Arlington's. This is a really, really simple design. It doesn't really flower. It's just some sedges. It's native, but it's easy. And it's really easy to tell what is a weed and what's not. So if this is you, if this is what the level of what you want, this is a possibility. You can do this. If you're like, I don't really want flowers, I just want something that looks easy. Here's an example of some Monarda. This is the bee balm together with the swamp milkweed. Here together with some black-eyed Susans. Here's an example of some Joe Pye. That's what's flowering here together with kind of some shrubs around the edges. Here's a nice example. I think this is both, it might be like a baby Joe Pye together with black-eyed Susans that just simple, you know, it's not necessarily in bunches, but it's a limited number of species and it makes it kind of look nice together. This is one actually from my yard. My yard does not have a traditional rain garden, you know, installed by installer. I have a low spot. And so I've been working on planting up that low spot. And so this is kind of how I do for the year-round planting. So I let the violets, common violets are native. I let the violets grow. So I've got those blooming in kind of the early spring. I do have some bluebells. I want them to take over, but I will be patient. Kind of the March, April timeframe. And then I have sweet spire, which is again, that Virginia sweet spire is that shrub. I have that blooming. That's kind of off screen over here. In the May, June timeframe. This is lizard's tail. It loves wet conditions. That blooms kind of in the June, July, and then also bee balm. You can see here, I'll use my mouse so that people online can see. This is lizard's tail. This is bee balm. My sweet spires over here. I do also have a meadow rue blooming right here. It's a little wild, but you know, I make my kids deal with it. And then I did get some volunteer jewelweed in kind of the August, September timeframe. The hummingbirds love it. So that again blooms August, September. And then I have turtlehead, an obedient plant that blooms in this area in this kind of September, October timeframe. So another thing to think about is plant height by season. So for example, the bluebells are short. Sweet spires kind of always, it's a shrub, it's in its place. The lizard's tail kind of comes up over the bluebells and common violets, but that's fine because they die back by the time they're kind of blooming. So, and then jewelweed just takes over. And then everything else kind of dies back by the time turtlehead and obedient plant starts blooming in the fall. So just a personal example for you all, some of which is planted and some of which is not. So which of the following is true about plant design? Rain gardens should stick out and look totally different from all the surrounding landscape. Your rain garden design should be as complex as possible and not group together any plants. Always put the tallest plants in the front and hide smaller plants in the back. Never look at mature size when spacing shrubs. Consider year-round interest and bloom times in your design. Which one is it? E, that's right, absolutely. Nice job, guys. Okay, where to find rain garden plants. So I do have on our table in the back some other sources for where you can find native plants or rain garden plants. But one really great one that's about to open up, right, Dan? Or did you guys already open it up? The seedling sale? It's open. Okay. So the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District seedling sale is currently open for orders. It's a pain to register on it, but it's worth it. They have a great set of seedlings this year. It is, oh gosh, I looked it up. Serviceberry. Anyway, look on their website. If you look up Northern Virginia Soil and Water Seedling Sale, you can find it. They've got 4 different species this year, and they're all really lovely. Yes. Oh my God, why didn't I include their sangha in here? You're totally right. I will change this slide. It's a new slide. I'll add it. Earth Sangha, SANGHA. In case you are online, and I will add that to this before I put it up online, before we put them up online, is another great source of locally sourced seed stock. So it's got some really nice local wild diversity in their stock is really lovely as well. They're located off of Cloud Drive in Franconia area. Also Long Branch Nature Center native plant sale is great. If you are looking to buy flats of plugs, ISIL native plants, this is not a recommendation, it's only information, is a homeowner source where they are kind of the middleman between the nurseries that sell the flats of plugs and those homeowners. So you can buy those directly from ISIL native plants online. There are an abundance of information on the Plant Nova Natives website as well. Yes. Yes, I will. The Earth Sangha. Yes. Which other one? Oh, the seedling sale?
Yeah.
Yeah, the seedling sale is the first link up on here.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry that wasn't clear. There is also, you can also buy them some directly from Virginia Department of Forestry. They have a very nice website, Buy Virginia Trees, byvatrees.com. I will just put a plug for those of you who are here from Fairfax County or, no, City of Alexandria, not anymore, and Fairfax City. Or if you're watching this all on afterwards, you can apply for the Soil and Water VCAP program, Virginia Conservation Assistance Program. They do have cost share grants for different kinds of things. If you're in Arlington, we do have a stormwater utility credit for rain gardens, as well as other practices for that single family homeowner. The rain barrel is the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit. If you're really only here for the credit program, that's what I would recommend, honestly. Other learning opportunities, we do also have Northern Virginia rain barrel workshops. We've got one coming up in March, and there will be additional ones added throughout the spring. Quick other plugs, if you are at risk for flooding, Flood Awareness Week is coming up, I think the second week in March. You can look online at FEMA's flood insurance risk max. More than 20% of flood insurance claims, however, are from low to moderate risk areas. So, think about your basement and, whether you might be vulnerable to flooding, inland flooding outside of like a stream floodplain area as well. You can purchase any additional flood insurance through your insurance agent. The reason why we plug it now is because there's a waiting period before your flood insurance can take effect. And so we plug it now so that you can add it to your insurance policy, and then it'll be in place before the big storms come in May, June, July. Also, just a reminder, don't drown. Turn around. Don't try to drive through floodwaters. Don't try to wade through floodwaters. If it's rained recently, be aware, and things like that. All right, and that is it for me. I'm gonna have to click to exit. Yeah, thank you. And don't need to see that. I think at this point, Rebecca, you want to come up and lead us? Yeah. Okay.
The virtual attendees as well. I'll also keep my face off of the screen. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Perfect.
Yep. All right, let's do that. So let's see, it is 10:37 now. I know Dan has a lot of information to cover, so why don't we take like a 13-minute break? We'll plan to reconvene at 10:50. Again, plenty of restrooms outside. You can check out the rain garden outside as well. I was just checking the weather and it's getting up to like a nice 50 degrees. So that might be a nice opportunity to get some fresh air. But again, virtual attendees, folks in the room, we'll plan to restart again in about 12 minutes now. So thanks.
And if you have questions, you can come talk to us.
Yes, and go talk to Plant Nova natives as well. And folks online, I'm going to mute and turn off the video so that you do not just have to see my face for 10 minutes. Hit. All right. And Lily, will you make sure people can see these slides? That I'm gonna pass it over.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. And good morning, everybody. Still morning, isn't it? So I know people online didn't hear me when I introduced myself the first time. So I am Dan Schwartz, soil scientist with the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District.
This part of the presentation will get a little more into the nitty-gritty of the design and sizing. Not too much detail. The nice thing is we've got some online resources, which really makes a lot of the calculations fairly simple. But when you're going about it the first time, it can seem, hopefully, doesn't seem too daunting, but it can be a little intimidating. But I just kind of wanted to run through things to show you that it is fairly simple with some basic math and some basic assumptions. You can size out a rain garden. And I will say at the beginning that if you're putting in a rain garden as a homeowner, chances are it's a voluntary thing. You don't have to do sizing. If you want to put in a 50 square foot rain garden because that's the space you have, you can do that. Sizing is only required when you're doing a rain garden that is required. Let's say you're building a new house, a new structure, and you're required by law to control the stormwater off of it. You have to size it to a certain size to get your permits from the counties. As a homeowner who's just doing it for fun, you don't have to do this, but I think it's worthwhile to do sizing for most of you because you'll see it's not too complicated. And if you do sizing, it means that you can be relatively certain that you're capturing a certain volume of water. So it means that the effort and time and expense that you're putting into building your rain garden is showing results. You know you're capturing a certain gallon of water and that those gallons are getting filtered and not flowing off of your property. But again, it is not mandatory for these voluntary homeowner rain gardens. You can put in any size rain garden you want. All right. So to get started, again, my office is the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. That's our terrible acronym up there. There's no real way to shorten it. We do service, just our service area is Fairfax County. But all these resources are available for anybody. So you can go onto our website and download both our rain garden homeowners construction guide, design and construction guide, which we had some hard copies of, but it looks like they all got picked up. But if you want to, you can go online, download it and get a PDF version. And then this is what I'm really going to be talking about today, what's over here on the right-hand side, and that is our sizing spreadsheet. Fairly simple spreadsheet that you can go in, put in your roof areas, put in your desired depths of the rain garden, and it'll kick out the square footage and also calculate the material volumes you'll need if you're going and purchasing your own materials. Obviously, if you're using a contractor, this isn't all that important, although your contractor may find some use out of this guide as well, too. Yes, question in the back. Sure.
Tell us the depth. Now, is it based on the water that is the flow that we have from the property, or how is that calculated?
So the depths, actually, you put in your own numbers, and I'll give you some general kind of rough standard depths. But the nice thing that I think about the rain garden sizing spreadsheet is that you can go in and say, oh, let's say generally we have 6 to 12 inches of ponding depth on the surface. 6 is more of a standard. I'm going to put in 6 inches of ponding and 18 inches of rain garden soil. How big is my rain garden going to be if I use those depths? And it spits out, oh, it's going to be 175 square feet. And go, whoa, that's way too big. What if I up it to 9 inches of ponding, 24 inches of soil media? And you can play around with it and see how changes in the depths change the footprint, the square footage of your rain garden. So in a way, it's kind of an iterative process. You basically figure out the space you have to work with, and then you play around with the spreadsheet to find a design that fits into that space. Sure. So hopefully everybody got those URLs down. The worksheet, or the resource sheet that got sent out, that Rebecca sent out with your confirmation email when you registered for this workshop, has all these URLs on there as well too. So they're all on there, but if you want to copy them down, they're up here as well too. So what I'm going to do first is talk about the homework that you should do, the design and construction homework you should do as you're planning out your rain garden. I'm going to go through these steps real quick, and actually Lily already covered the first two, so we're going to skip right over those and go to number 3. So I'm just going to go through them and describe them very generally at first, and then we're going to go back through them and do a kind of an example design using my own roof in Reston as the example for how you can go about sizing and locating a rain garden. So again, Lily already talked about why you want, make the decision on why you want to build a rain garden, what your goals are, decide where you want to place the rain garden. See that 10-foot buffer around your house. You don't want to put it under your mature trees. You want to put it in relatively close location to your downspout, so you don't have to do a lot of fancy rejiggering of your downspout to get the water to the rain garden. So we're kind of going over the basics of those. And now we're going to go into the suitabilities, and then the sizing, and then the construction guide. So check the placement suitability. With Lily's instructions before, you probably have a rough idea now of where you want your rain garden to go. Again, with that buffer in mind around the house, easy access to the downspout. So you might have 1, 2, 3 locations that are potential for your rain garden. Now you have to see, is the rain garden actually going to work there? And really what you want to do, primary thing to check is your soil suitable? So all of these online mapping resources, which again were included in the resource guide that Rebecca sent out, these are just them listed again as well too. It's nice over the last 10 or 15 years, basically all of the local jurisdictions have started putting up their GIS mapping software, or at least a public version of the GIS mapping software up on their website. So you can go in and zoom in on your house and see where utility lines are, see if there's any easements, and also check your soil types. And that's really what I'm going to get into. You need soil that perks. That's why often we say, don't put the rain garden in the wet spot in your lawn. Put the rain garden above the wet spot so you can capture the water before it gets to that wet spot. If you put the rain garden in the wet spot, the fact that that soil is wet year round is kind of a good sign that it probably does not percolate very well. You need good free draining soil for a fully functioning rain garden. This is just an example of one very nice, well-intentioned rain garden that a church put in on their property using Boy Scout labor. They were sitting on marine clay in Franconia. Basically, they created a wetland. That's fine, but that's not what they were looking to do. Wetland is still doing some functions, but they had a very, very wet, consistently wet spot. Cattails were growing out. Can't really see it there because it's the middle of winter, but they created a wetland because they put a rain garden into a soil that has really, really dense, heavy clay. Here's another little more obvious example. This is one that a contractor built in a new construction in Prince William County. The soil obviously was not well suited and it became basically a little stormwater detention pond. This was full of plants. All those plants are dead because they all drowned. So you do want to make sure that you got good soil to avoid stuff like this. So you can, I'm using just Fairfax County's examples here. And the nice thing is whether you live in Arlington, Alexandria, Falls Church, City of Fairfax, they all have their different soil maps, but all the soil types mapped in those jurisdictions are also mapped in Fairfax County. And Fairfax County has this really nice soils guide. And in that soils guide, there's one column that says suitability for infiltration trenches. Now, you're not building an infiltration trench, you're building a rain garden, but the types of soil that are good for infiltration trenches are the exact same types of soil that are good for rain gardens. So you can just go to that guide, look up that infiltration trench column suitability and say, oh, my soil is pretty suitable for this. All right, that's a good starting point. There's also other details in there that are useful. Depth to bedrock, depth to groundwater. All those things are things that you might want to know. Having said that, just because your soil is listed as not particularly well suited for a rain garden, it doesn't mean you can't put a rain garden there. Soil is variable. We're trying to put like these nice clean categories on soil that's going to change from spot to spot. A soil that has poor suitability for a rain garden, you can find a spot in your yard that's going to percolate pretty well. I almost guarantee it. You can also find in areas that are rated as good for infiltration trenches, a spot where the soil is very dense and doesn't perk well. So don't think of this as a kiss of death if you go to the ratings guide and it says that your soil is not well suited. If you go to the ratings guide and it says that you're likely to find water table within the first 6 inches of your soil, well, then that's probably a pretty clear example that you might want to start looking at something else. But just remember, soils are variable. So these will give you guidance, but it's not a hard and fast rule necessarily. So look up your soil type, look up that suitability for infiltration trenches, look up the depth of bedrock and groundwater as well too. Those 3 things will really help you determine, is this going to work? Is it not? And then the thing is, you know, if you look up soil maps, you see there's lines, which are estimates of where one soil meets another. Sometimes you'll see on your own property, the front yard will have one soil type map, the backyard will have a different soil type. And sometimes one of those soil types will be rated as, you know, very good as suitability for infiltration trenches. Some will be rated very poor. So sometimes you'll see that you've got multiple soils on your property. Some might be good for infiltration, some might not be. If you've already picked out a few spots using the guidance that Lily gave you in her presentation, you found 3 or 4 locations, maybe you find one of those locations that was a potential for a rain garden is located in this really suitable soil. Those other 2 locations are located in pretty poor soil. That'll help guide you as to what the most likely beneficial location for your rain garden is going to be. So bottom line, if you can find it, look up your soil types and then look up how those soil types are rated. in terms of their suitability for infiltration trenches. And that'll really help guide you to probably what is the best spot on your property for that rain garden. Yes, ma'am. Sure. So oftentimes the question for those of you online is when you are looking up soil types or the soil map, it often will have an alphanumeric code. Some of these soil names are pretty long. Wheaton Glenelg complex is one. It's right up there. And yeah, all right. We got some Wheaton Glenelg complex. Very common soil type in Fairfax County and Arlington and Alexandria. Sometimes it's a little too long to put that whole name on the map. It just clutters everything up. So you put an alphanumeric code, 39C, 39B, something like that. It's just the legend code. So you basically, if you see that alphanumeric code, you just have to find the legend and see what name that number alphanumeric code refers to. So there's no rhyme or reason why one is one. I know in Fairfax County, we just did it alphabetically. So the A's start with soil number 1 and the W's start with, a much higher number, but it's different for each county. So just find the legend and that'll tell you what the code means, the soil number code. Those red lines are the soil boundaries. Remember, these are estimates. Soil phases into one soil type. So we have to put a nice clean boundary on it just to make a nice clean map. But chances are, if you're close to the boundary, you're probably going to have properties of both soil types somewhere in there. Well, mostly these maps, if you're not sure, I mean, the label will be on there, either the name as shown here or that alphanumeric code. If it's a little unclear, because sometimes they do get cluttered, just click on it, and usually a little table will pop up and say, this is soil type 39C.
So does that map on the first URL?
I'm sorry, say it a little louder.
Is the map on the first URL?
Oh, that's the first one. This is just for Fairfax County, though. So if you don't live in Fairfax County, look at that sheet that Rebecca sent out with your confirmation email. It'll have all of the links to the GIS mapping software for all of our localities. So this is Fairfax version. Arlington has their own. Falls Church has their own. Alexandria has their own. Yes.
But the letter is about slope.
In Fairfax, it is. So for instance, we have here 39B Glenelg. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. 39 is the number code for Glenelg. B is the slope class, which means 2 to 7% in this case. You might find in your property it's 39C, which is Glenelg on a 7 to 15% slope. 39D, Glenelg on a 15 to 25% slope. But it's not necessarily always consistent from county to county. These soil maps were done at different times by different people. So usually it is A is very flat, B is a little more slope, C is a little more slope, and you go up to a D class. But that's not always the case. So just make sure you find the legend so you know what those codes mean.
To the national photograph classification that we study there. Right.
Yes.
It is related to that.
These are official USDA soil series. Sure. All right. And the next step, once you've, again, done what Lily suggested and find those several spots around your property that look generally suitable, check the spots for the soil types to see if they really do look suitable or not, or one spot looks more suitable than the others. And then the next thing you want to do is call Miss Utility again. Now, you don't necessarily always have to do this. If you called Miss Utility the first time just to find those initial suitable spots and the markings are still visible, by all means, just use those markings. But they only last for a couple weeks. It rains, it snows, the wind blows, leaves fall, they get covered up. So if you don't remember where those utilities were, or if the lines have disappeared, just call Miss Utility again. They'll come out. It's a free service. They'll mark it again. Because the next step that we're going to do does involve a little bit of digging, and that's to measure your soil's infiltration rate. You're not going to do a lot of digging for this, but you do want to go down, if you can, at least 12 inches, but more ideally 18 to 24. If you have something like a post hole digger, or if you're just really good with a shovel, it shouldn't be too hard to get a nice hole down about 18 or 24 inches. But basically what you're going to be doing is testing the infiltration rate of your soil, which is the rate water percolates down and out into your soil from the surface. And to do this, you dig a hole, again, ideally about 18 to 24 inches. You fill it up with water. You let that water sit and soak for 24 hours. And then the next day you fill the hole up again. You place a flat stick or a ruler across the top, and then you measure the distance from the ruler, which is basically the ground surface, to the surface of the water. So you're not measuring the water depth, you're measuring the distance from the surface of the hole, the ground, to the top of the water. And then you see how quickly that water recedes. And you usually take a reading once every hour for at least 4 hours, which means you take 5 readings at hour 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You measure the distance again from that flat stick to the top of the water. Here we went from 5 1/8 inch at hour 0 at the start of the test, 9 1/8 inch at hour 1, to 11 3/8 on hour 2, 12 5/8 on hour 3, and then finally 13 7/8 on hour 4. You measure the difference in those numbers. That's your drop. So this shows you how far the water dropped each of those hours. And then you measure your infiltration rate, which is simple in this case because we were just taking a measurement every hour. So the drop and the infiltration rate are the same. 4 inches per hour, 2.25 inches per hour, 1.3, 1.3. And then we get our final rate there, which I said is 1.3. So you might be wondering, why do we set our final rate as 1.3 instead of the average of those data points that you just took? There's no standard. Obviously, the bigger the hole, the more surface area of soil. So you might see a little bit faster rate, but there isn't a standard. I'd say it's whatever you can do with the equipment that you have. Ideally, what you want to see in your infiltration data is what we call the steady state rate, which is at a certain point, hopefully what you see is that the drop from 1 hour to the next starts steadying out, starts becoming kind of constant, which it does here. So we had a nice fast drop on the first couple of hours, but it slowed down, but then it found that steady state. That's ideally what we want to see, because usually by the time you've hit that steady state, that's showing you over the long term, this is what your infiltration rate is going to be. If you take your data and you still see a drop, that the rate is still decreasing each hour over those first 4 hours, what you probably should do is extend your test a little bit. Go to hour 5, go to hour 6 if you can. Because what's going to happen to a soil like this? I mean, we could take the average rate here, it'd be about 2 inches per hour. That's a really nice infiltration rate. But is that really what you're going to see in your rain garden? Probably not, because this is showing us that over 4 hours, that rate is dropping and dropping at a fairly consistent rate. Hour 5, what is it going to do? Hour 6, maybe it goes all the way down to 0. So after 7 or 8 hours of absorbing water, it just stops and the soil is clogged. You don't want that to happen on your rain garden. You want that rain garden to infiltrate the first storm just as well as it infiltrates the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th storm afterwards. This thing hopefully will be sitting in your yard for decades. You want to make sure it works for decades as well too. And if we have that constantly dropping rate, it's not really telling you whether that soil is suitable or not. You have to find that steady state. And that's when you can have fairly good confidence that your soil is well suited for that rain garden. Hopefully that makes sense. So once you found your steady state, these are just sort of general guides that we have as to how you can build your rain garden, because there's different styles of rain garden. If you've got fairly good porous soil, all you really have to do is dig out a little bit of space on the top to create your ponding depth, and then mix in compost with your soil, which we call amending the soil. If it's really porous soil to begin with, you don't have to change it that much. You just amend it with a little compost to make it even a little bit more porous, and that's pretty much all you have to do. So what we generally say is if you find after your infiltration test that you have a steady state rate that's greater than 1/2 inch per hour, you can do that simple rain garden where you just dig out the ponding depth, keep your soil in place, mix in some compost, amend it with some compost. So your rain garden would look like this. This is basically the most simple type of homeowner rain garden you can have. You got your ponding area, your plants, your mulch layer, and then down below that, you've got the soil in your backyard, your natural soil, but amended, mixed in, tilled in with compost. We usually say to till it in at about a 1-to-4 ratio. That means you take 1 inch of compost and you mix it in to 4 inches of soil. So if you wanted to do 12 inches of amended soil, you would take 3 inches of compost and mix it into the top foot of your soil. 3 times 4 is 12. If your steady state rate is a little slower, if it's between 0.5 and 0.25 inches per hour, so 1/2 to 1/4 inch per hour, at that point, we usually do recommend not using your native soil. Instead, you go in, you dig it out, you excavate your native soil, your natural soil, and replace it with what we call commercial rain garden soil media. What is this? It's a big fancy word for really sandy stuff. really sandy soil that you can buy from your Merrifield garden centers, some of the local quarries and other kind of industrial suppliers. Rain garden soil media is basically about 75 to 80% sand mixed with compost and topsoil to give the soil enough nutrients and fertility to allow your plants to grow. But it's a really sandy mix, which means it percolates water very, very quickly. When you see big commercial rain gardens being built, the rain garden in the back here, I'm sure there's rain garden soil media down there that they brought in from a supplier. So 0.5 to 2.5 inches as your steady state rate. That's when we recommend removing the soil and replacing it with this rain garden soil media, which is something you would purchase. You can also add an optional gravel layer down at the bottom. That obviously increases the effort you have to do in building this because you need to dig down deeper to put that gravel layer there. But that gravel stores a lot of water, so it allows more water to be stored in the same footprint, the same size rain garden. And then lastly, if your steady state rate is less than 1/4 inch per hour, then we recommend two things: that you excavate, remove the natural soil, replace it with a rain garden soil media and an optional gravel layer down below, and you add an underdrain. An underdrain is basically a French drain, a perforated pipe down in the rain garden. It's called an underdrain, but it doesn't always have to be on the underside of the rain garden. Most people do, if they have a gravel layer, do put it down in the gravel layer, but you can put it up a little bit higher too. We do recommend, if you put it up in the rain garden soil media, like shown here, that you still surround that underdrain with a sleeve of gravel, because the gravel acts as kind of a filter to make sure that that soil doesn't flow into the perforations of the pipe and clog it up over time. There is some benefit to having your underdrain a little bit higher. Underdrains actually work by draining water that's rising up from below. So the water, the rainwater percolates down through your rain garden. It hits that fairly impermeable or slowly permeable natural soil you have, and then it starts pooling up on the bottom of the rain garden. And then when it rises up to the bottom of the underdrain pipe, that's when it flows into the pipe. It's not when it's percolating down, it's when it's flowing back up after it's pooled on the bottom. So the higher up you put your underdrain, the more volume of water can be stored underneath, and that gives the water more time to hopefully eventually percolate out into the soil, even if your soil is only slowly permeable. Still allow it a day or two to get down into the soil. Whereas if you put the underdrain a little bit lower, there's just less volume that's stored below the pipe. It's a personal preference kind of thing, but just something to keep in mind. To keep things simple, rather than, creating some long, complicated name for it, we'll call these soils with good naturally draining soil in place already an amended rain garden. The soils, you just go in and add amendments to the natural soil. We'll just call it an amendment rain garden, and the other ones we'll call an excavated rain garden, just for simplicity of terms. Now, let's say you go through all of this consideration. You did what Lily did. You looked at the 10-foot buffer around your house. You looked where you have mature trees. You looked to see what's in relative close proximity to your downspouts. Maybe you found a couple spots that were suitable for a rain garden, and then you checked your soil, did your infiltration test, and really found out they're not suitable. Or maybe you did what Lily suggested and you found, I don't really have any suitable spots. My property is too small. I've got too many trees. There's not really a good spot for a rain garden at all. If you find from this analysis that there just really isn't a good location for a traditional rain garden, there is another option. I call it a rain garden in a box. I think some people call it a stormwater planter, but it's basically an above ground rain garden. So you can build a rain garden by layering in the layers of the excavated rain garden into a container at ground level. Now, these people did it on their own using a raised garden bed kit. I've seen people use stock troughs, like what they use to water horses and cows and things like that. But any large, sturdy, above ground container will do, as long as it's sturdy enough to hold the weight of that soil inside, which is sizable. This is an interesting example. They had both bad soil, but this is also a townhouse in Old Town Alexandria. So their lot was literally 15 feet wide. So they had very little space to work with. They had a big stormwater problem in the back. So what they did is, through some creative rerouting of their downspout, they placed this above ground rain garden kind of halfway into their backyard. And now their downspout is spilling into it. And they only have one downspout because it's a small roof. And at least all that water is now getting soaked and filtered down through this above ground rain garden in a box. And they can actually look pretty as well too. So that's the same one after about 2 growing seasons. It's a really good photo because it was taken by the landscaper who installed it, but that is what it looks like. So it's serving a function. It's got structure to it. You can see the inflow and the outflow pipes, but it can look like a nice part of your regular garden as well too. Here's another one, similar kind of build. This is one that we provided some grant funding for. The homeowner pretty much built this all themselves, rerouted the downspout, didn't use a contractor. This is what it looked like shortly after installation, and this is what it looked like when we inspected it this summer. So it really took off in terms of its growth. You can see that Joe Pye weed poking out. So again, we were a little concerned when we first put these in whether this would become too hot and the soil would become too hot for these plants to survive. But at least the two examples that we've done so far, and I know there's a third one on the way, they're growing very, very nicely. So they seem to work and seem to provide a good growing medium for our native plants. All right. Lily, I think we have some hands raised. I don't know if there's any questions coming in.
Yes, so, but there are some good questions in the chat. One reminder to please repeat questions when we have them. So you can repeat them. And then a question from about 5 minutes ago.
Where does the drain lead to? So there's a question on,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So there's a question on the chat of where the underdrain leads to. The underdrain does have to come to the surface somewhere. So that's another consideration as well too. If you have a very flat lot, it can be hard to put an underdrain in because you have to create a very long trench in order to bring that drain to the surface. And it's a gravity drain, so it has to maintain a constant, very slight downward grade. It's not going to flow uphill. So sometimes if you have too flat of a lot or you're trying to put a rain garden into a low spot, you might not be able to do an underdrain if you don't have some place downstream or some place downhill of that location where you can daylight that drain, bring it to the surface. That's a good question.
There's a second question. How about soil mapping with all the tear downs and rebuild? And they're stating, soil being taken out, another soil, the other soil that's being brought in, they're talking about is topsoil.
Sure. So the question is, how valid is the soil mapping in a very urban area like Arlington, where there's a lot of tear downs and rebuilds? Honestly, if you go to the Arlington soil map, it's very general to begin with because they mapped it. It was probably about 20 to 30 years ago. So it was after Arlington was developed that they mapped it. So there's a lot of what we call urban land soil, urban land wheaton complex. So there's not a huge amount of detail on those soil maps just because there really can't be. And the same thing is true of Fairfax County. I helped with that soil mapping. We had to do a lot of urban land complexes as well too. So yes, in urban areas, I'd say the soil maps are even a little more generalized than they would be in a more natural area, but it still can give you at least a decent idea of what you have in your yard. Sure. Lily's going to add something real quick too.
So for all of our Arlington folks, and Dan, you can explain this in probably more clearly than I can, but a lot of our maps wouldn't say Wheaton Glenelg, it would say urban land Glenelg. That is the same thing as Wheaton Glenelg. Maybe you can explain why, but you explain why. But it's the same. Urban land Glenelg is the same thing as Wheaton Glenelg. Okay.
Now, urban land is just a general term for paving, rooftop, human-made materials. Wheaton is basically what we call a disturbed soil, which is when you take natural soil like Glenelg, which is one of our common natural soils around, and you put 150 houses on top, you stir up that soil a lot. So the natural layering gets changed. So there's still quite a bit of soil around in the front yard and the backyard, but it's going to be this disturbed variant where things have been mixed, graded, and compacted a bit more than the original soil that was there. Question, yes.
Complexes and paper two, they talked that the Wheaton was where the development zone was.
Yes.
Streets, driveways, and foundation, and then the Glenelg was the undisturbed.
Yes, yeah. Usually the Wheaton is kind of clustered closer to the structure itself. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any concern in situations where you have low infiltration, excavated soil, that soil you're bringing there have any like invasive species like jumping worms?
So the question is, if you are bringing in rain garden soil media, is there a concern that that soil media could contain invasive species? Jumping worms specifically is what you mentioned, but I'm sure any other invasives. I'm sure there's always a chance. Oftentimes, I would say maybe a little bit less of a chance with rain garden soil media because it is a bit more of a constructed product because it has so much sand in it. And hopefully they're using good finished compost that has gone through, the full composting, heated up enough that it kills off weed seeds. But can I say with certainty that there won't be any invasives in there? No, I can't. And I guess it's always a possibility when you're bringing in new material to a property.
Less likely, say, just pile of mulch.
Yes, certainly I would say less likely to have invasives than a pile of mulch or the free mulch you can pick up at the landfills. Yeah. All right. So we've kind of checked the suitability of our placement, know how to do a basic infiltration test now. Now we get into the sizing. So you found a spot, the soil looks good. You want to figure out how big this rain garden is going to have to be. So the next step is to determine the size of your rain garden. And then from that size, you can determine what materials you need and the volume of materials you need. And both of those things are kind of handled by our rain garden sizing spreadsheet. And then, of course, once you have that volume of materials, then you can figure out what tools you're going to need. Are you dealing with a cubic yard or 5 or 6 cubic yards? And at that point, too, you might decide, oh, this is a project that's a little too big for me. I'm probably going to need to find a contractor to do this. To give you a rough idea, a cubic yard, 1 to 1.5 cubic yards is about the amount of material you can stick into a full-size pickup truck. So if you're dealing with 1, 2, 3 cubic yards, that might be a good size for a homeowner to deal with, a good size project for you to do on your own. If it's more like 10 or 12 cubic yards, then you might think that's the contractor job. And then finally, of course, once you've got your tools, once you know the volumes of materials you're working with and the size of your rain garden, you can estimate your costs. Well, let's look at that rain garden sizing spreadsheet real quick. So this is what it looks like when you pull it up. It's a simple Excel spreadsheet. Those yellow areas are your input cells. The light gray ones are the calculation cells, so they will calculate something for you once you put in those yellow inputs. And then the dark gray ones are our constant cells. We have this all set up to size your rain garden as if it were collecting the rainwater from a 1-inch rainfall. Now, just because that 1 inch is a constant cell, you can change it. If you decided, it's too big, I'm just going to capture a 1/2 inch. You can use this spreadsheet for a 1/2 inch as well, too. A 1/4 inch as well, if you wanted something even smaller. The rain garden sizing spreadsheet is kind of broken into 2 general parts. The top part is the actual sizing. This is where you put in information about the depths of your layers and how much surface area is flowing to your rain garden, how much rooftop, how much lawn. And it'll determine the footprint of your rain garden, what the surface area of the rain garden is. And then down at the bottom, we have the material volumes. So once you've figured out the footprint of your rain garden, the bottom half of the spreadsheet will start populating saying, okay, if you want a rain garden of this size and of this depth, you're going to need 1 cubic yard of mulch, 2 cubic yards of rain garden soil media, so on and so forth. It'll tell you the materials you'll need to construct a rain garden of that size and that depth. And then, of course, sizing determines the material volumes. And once you have the material volumes, you can figure out your tools and your costs. I'm dealing with 1 cubic yard. I can use shovels and wheelbarrows. I'm dealing with 5 cubic yards. I might need to hire a little mini excavator or get some equipment rentals or even think about a contractor instead. Once all that is determined, you've got the size of your rain garden, determine what materials you need and the volumes, and thus from the volumes, you can figure out what tools will be practical to actually build that rain garden, and you can estimate the cost based upon what the cost of those volumes are, whether you're going to be using your own labor or a contractor's labor. Then you can move on to construction. And again, remember, I'm going through this really quick, and we're actually going to do an example once we've gone through all these homework steps. So construction, what does that look like? Well, I say usually before construction, call Miss Utility again. Again, this is optional. If you have the markings still marked, if they're still very visible, you don't have to. But chances are probably some of them have washed off or become faded and you're not exactly sure where those electrical lines, those sewer lines are. Mark them again. It's much better to have an angry Miss Utility marker come out to your property 3 times than to accidentally cut an electrical line with your shovel. Then you want to mark out the site. You can use flagging tape. You can use spray paint. Spray paint's very easy to figure out where the footprint of your rain garden is going to go, Mark it down so you know where you're going to be digging. Then you have to deal with the grass as well too. It's a lot easier to do excavation when the grass is gone. If you have a sod cutter already, which most people probably don't, it's a great tool to have. If you don't have it, it's pretty easy to rent from equipment rental places around here. There's even some Home Depots and Lowe's that will rent them to you. If you don't want to deal with that machinery and you've got a little time, you can set out some solarization. Basically put some black tarp on top, black plastic tarp to both heat up and smother the grass. If you put this out a month or so before you begin construction, you should be able to kill that grass off pretty well before you put the first shovel into the ground. And of course, if you're getting an excavator or hiring a contractor, you don't really have to worry about the grass. Big excavator like this is going to cut through that grass like butter. It's not going to be a problem. Now you're ready to dig. You've got your area marked off. You've killed off the grass. You've got the footprint kind of marked out. Now it's ready to start digging. So what I usually recommend if you're doing this yourself is to put 2 stakes down, pound them into the ground, run a line between them, just a string between them, make sure it's nice and level. You can hang a little line level on that. It's a very simple bubble level that hangs onto a string. And you basically run that right along the surface of the ground or wherever you think the top of your ponding area is going to be. And from there, you can start digging. And because you have that nice level, you know as you dig when you can stop. You know when you've reached the depth of excavation that you're aiming for. You want the surface of your rain garden to be nice and level as well too. So when it does fill up with water, it's an even pool of water over the entire surface of the rain garden. And that's what the stakes and the line level will give for you. This, I have 2 footprints marked out here. That orange area there is what we call the active footprint. And the area around is what we call the tapering zone. Active footprint is basically the footprint of your rain garden where you're going to have the full depth of your ponding and whatever layers of soil down below, whether it's the amended soil, or if you're excavating the soil and replacing it with rain garden soil media and that optional gravel layer, it's going to be under that active footprint. Because oftentimes, you go into the sizing spreadsheet, it's going to kick out some number. So let's say you put in your information, you find, oh, I need a 50 square foot rain garden. That's what the sizing spreadsheet is going to tell me. It's often easy just to make it a very simple geometric shape, a circle, a square, a rectangle in this case, because then it's very easy to know exactly when you've got the right footprint and how much volume you need to fill up that footprint. But oftentimes people don't like that hard edge. You got your grass leading up to the edge of the rain garden. You might want kind of a more natural shape to it, a little more organic look to it. Or maybe you don't want your grass coming to the edge of the rain garden and having an immediate 6 inch drop off where your ponding depth starts. You'd rather have kind of a gentle taper, kind of a ramp down. That's what that pink area, that sort of acorn squash shaped area looks like. Some people like to plant outside of the footprint of their rain garden as well too, to sort of match the aesthetics of their lawn a little bit more and tie in the rain garden a little bit more to the lawn. So it's not quite so clear that there's a rain garden sitting right here. It just looks more like an extension of your existing landscaping. And that's what you can do in this taper area, this border area around outside. That area is entirely optional, but if you'd rather have that kind of tapered side where the slopes down to your rain garden are nice and gentle and planted, you can create a little bit of extra digging around there to create that tapering. But it's for aesthetic looks. It's an optional thing that you can do. The active footprint is all that you really need to do. So now you're going to start digging. So we've got this 10-foot by 5-foot rain garden that we're digging out, 50 square feet, not too big. You can use shovels, you can use an excavator, but now that you have that level string lined across the top, you can drop a ruler, measure down, so you know when you've gotten to the correct depth of excavation and you can stop. And then you also know if the depth is the same in every spot in your rain garden, that means your rain garden surface is going to be nice and level as well too. And then if you are doing some tapering, you can add that wedge-shaped tapering on the sides as well too to create that more aesthetically pleasing shape to your rain garden. Again, entirely optional to do the tapering. And then if you're also using a berm, you can use the soil that you are digging out to create that berm as well too. If you are doing a berm, you really do have to be careful to kill off all the grass first, because if you have some dead grass blades and roots and stuff in your berm, it's going to start decomposing and your berm might start slumping a little bit. So that's one of the reasons why you want to kill off that grass first. Now, let's say we went through our sizing spreadsheet. It said we need a 50 square foot rain garden. We're going to use amended soil. and we want 6 inches of ponding. You're actually going to dig a little deeper than 6 inches because remember, we're adding compost down into our soil. We're also going to add a little bit of mulch before we put our plants in. That compost adds a little bit of depth to your soil. That mulch obviously adds a little bit of depth as well too. So you have to compensate for that when you're doing your excavation. So if you want 6 inches of ponding, in a case like this, you're probably going to have to dig down about 9.5 inches. And the nice thing is the sizing spreadsheet will tell you that number as well too. It'll tell you your ultimate excavation depth to compensate for the materials that you add back to the soil and thus raise the surface of the rain garden a little bit. If you are using a berm, one of the nice things about the berm is it sometimes will allow you to excavate less, because in effect, what the berm does is it raises your ponding depth above the existing ground level. If we were to say, let's put in a 5-inch berm around the entirety of our rain garden, that means that water is going to pond up to the top of that 5-inch berm. So in effect, you're having 5 inches of your ponding depth above the surface, your current land surface. So that means that you'd only actually have to dig down 4.5 inches in excavation. So sometimes using that berm means that you can excavate a little bit less. So now what we do, let's say this is going to be an amended soil rain garden. We've got a good greater than 0.5 inch per hour infiltration rate. Now we're going to go in, till in some of our compost down into the soil. In this case, we're doing 12 inches of depth. Remember, we like to do a 1-to-4 ratio. You take 1 inch of compost, you till it into 4 inches of soil. So if we want 12 inches of amended soil, that basically means we're adding in a 3-inch layer of compost and tilling it down. You can see our ponding depth is getting a little bit narrower, but it didn't decrease by 3 inches. We had dug down 9.5 inches. Now it's telling us our ponding depth is 8 inches. Well, how does that make any sense? We just added 3 inches of compost into our soil. Compost settles, it packs down pretty well. And our assumption is that it loses about half of its depth in the first 2-3 weeks after you install your rain garden. So we mix in 3 inches of compost to make that 12-inch amended soil depth. Within about a week or two, that compost will settle down to only about 1.5 inches. So in our sizing spreadsheet, we assume whatever depth of compost you're adding, it really is only going to add half of that depth to the soil itself. So we still have 8 inches of free space on top, whereas before we had 9.5. And now our soil is amended. If we had one of the slower draining soils, and instead of an amended soil rain garden, we were going to do an excavated rain garden where we dig out the soil, we replace it with, in this case, both that optional gravel layer and then the rain garden soil media, we're going to have to dig deeper. In this case, we'll go down 35 inches because we want to add in 9 inches of gravel down at the bottom, 18 inches of amended soil on the top. This stuff doesn't really settle, so we just assume if you're adding 9 inches, that means you're filling up 9 inches of your rain garden and it's going to stay filled. Same thing when we add that 18 inches of amended soil. It's going to fill in 1.5 feet of your rain garden and it's going to stay filled. It's not really going to settle too much. So we still, as with the other one, still have 8 inches of free space up on the top. This is what it looks like. This is contractors doing the work. They're putting in an under drain here, which you can see, but there you can see the gravel layer being layered down on the bottom. And then on top of that, they're going to put their rain garden soil medium. All right, so we've got our 2 rain gardens. We still have 8 inches of soil, open space on the top. We've forgotten one thing. We still need to put in that mulch. We put in 2 inches of mulch on each one. And now we have finally the 6 inches of finished ponding at the surface, which is what we were aiming for. And the last thing to do at this point is to plant. Plant densely and plant native. And those plant roots will work their way through the soil and they will really help the rain garden filter, because every time it rains, those roots will be taking up water. They're also adding a lot of good organic matter to the soil, a lot of good living microbes to the soil, which helps the water get filtered as it passes through your rain garden. Now, all that kind of stuff that I just showed was for a fairly flat site. If you're dealing with a slope, like this homeowner is, they've got this good spot for a rain garden. It's right at the edge of their existing downspout, but there is a good slope on there. You do have to have a flat surface on your rain garden so that the water will pool evenly over the entire surface. If you can't get that, one part of your rain garden is going to be consistently wet whenever it rains and the other parts will be dry. And especially if you're using amended soil, which is about 70 to 85% sand, those dry spots will get really dry and oftentimes your plants will die as a result. So you do want that even surface so that the water spreads out evenly. And the way to do that is basically to create a terrace through berming. So you would go to the uphill side and you would start cutting down on that uphill side. And then you would use the soil that you excavate from the uphill side to build up a berm on the downhill side. So you take that slope and eventually create it into a flat level terrace where the water can pool evenly over all of it. This can be a little harder to do. It's just a little bit more kind of sensitive construction to get it right. But if you do get it right, it often means that you don't have to excavate as much as if you were digging a rain garden onto a flat site where you do have to do just full excavation. So there is some benefit to it. It just takes a little bit of a finer hand, a good eye, and you really want to make sure that you are getting that level surface. It's just a little bit harder to do when you have that slope, but it is possible as long as you use the berm. And I'll give you some sort of extreme examples of cutting in and putting rain gardens into steep slopes to show you that it does take a little bit more effort, but it can create a really nice looking rain garden. This is one rain garden not too far from me in Reston. It's a little hard to see, but that rock wall on the left side is the uphill side of the rain garden. This was a really steep slope. That rock wall is about 24 to 30 inches high, so it's pretty high. So they had to cut down quite a bit, and then they used the soil to create a berm on the lower side. So they did get that nice flat terrace, but it did require quite a bit of earth moving on their part. But it created this really nice looking feature as well. Those are monitoring wells for the underdrain. So basically cleanouts for the underdrain, the two vertical pipes. And then you might see there's a couple of pop-up emitters there. This is a townhouse community. So there's multiple downspouts being piped to this rain garden through those pop-ups.
And they would go right off, probably, underground, something.
Maybe. They also make, it may not work for big roots, but they also have water cutters now as well too, that just send a jet of high pressure water through that can do angles. Yeah. Yeah, if you talk to a plumbing company, they might be able to get you. It depends on the material you use to. This is hard Schedule 40 PVC. You can definitely send a rotor-rooter down there. The black corrugated pipe that people use for their downspouts, that's a little bit more touchy because the rotor-rooter may just end up chewing up the pipe. That's good. These are, no, they don't need to be that high. And most of the ones we see are very close to the surface to make them less conspicuous. And it's optional. I think it's a useful thing, but it's optional. You know, if you're building your own rain garden, you don't have to have the cleanouts. But it's always nice to have them just in case something gets clogged. Here's another kind of extreme example. This was a really big rain garden. This was one of our classic victims of knockdown, tear down. So this was an existing house. The neighbor uphill of them knocked down the existing house there, put up a huge new house. And then every time it rained, their yard was getting blown out because all that roof was draining through there. So they put down these terraced series of very large rain gardens. They made it look nice, but you can see how much berming they had to do on the bottom side in order to build up that flat rain garden. This is a bit of an extreme example, but the homeowners have been very happy with this one. So you don't necessarily have to do something to this level, but it gives you an idea of what a rain garden on a very steep slope would look like. All right. Now we're going to determine the size of your rain garden and thus the volumes of materials that you are going to use. So again, we go back to our sizing spreadsheet. We need the URL. There it is again. Again, the top is your sizing. The bottom is the material volumes. When you start opening the spreadsheet, you're going to kind of go through a couple different steps. So determine first the impervious, which means rooftop and paving areas, and then the pervious areas, which would be lawn or other permeable areas that will drain to your rain garden. Second, determine the volume of runoff to be captured by that rain garden. That's highly determined by the drainage area. Obviously, if you have a larger area draining to your rain garden, it's going to be capturing more runoff. We size all of our rain gardens based upon the 1-inch storm, but you don't have to. You could do a 1/2 inch. You can do 3/4 of an inch. You can do a 1/4 inch if you wanted to. And the sizing spreadsheet will allow you to change that initial storm depth. Third step is decide on the depth of the layers in your rain garden. Are you using amended soil? If so, how deep are you going to go? What's your ponding depth on top? 6 inches, 8 inches, 9 inches? If you're using a rain garden soil media, how deep of a layer are you going to add? Are you going to add that optional gravel layer underneath? And how deep will that be? And then based upon all steps 1 through 3, then you will size your rain garden and determine your material volumes. The nice thing is with the spreadsheet, you only have to do yourself steps 1 and 3. The spreadsheet does 2 and 4 for you. So let's go through it. And again, always have to tell you that sizing is not mandatory. You can put in a 50 square foot rain garden in your backyard if you want to. You can go through the sizing spreadsheet and says to capture a 1-inch storm, you need 350 square feet of rain garden. Say, oh, that's ridiculous. That's way too big. I'm going to put in 50 square feet. Maybe it's only going to capture a 1/4 inch of rainwater. That's enough for me. That's better than what it is now. And that's perfectly fine. So first thing, look at your roof. Find out where your downspouts are. Do a little survey of your property. You probably have a pretty good idea where your downspouts are. You might even know which areas of roof drain to your downspouts, but you really do want to go look through your roof fairly well. Figure out where it's sloped, where the peaks are, where the drainage divides are, which areas of roof drain to which downspout, and where those downspouts let out. So if you are planning to build a rain garden near downspout X or Y or Z, you have a rough idea of the square footage of roof that will be draining to that downspout. If you're looking to capture other areas, like maybe runoff off the driveway or runoff off the lawn, look to see how the driveway and the lawn are sloped. Is it sending its water to a spot that can be captured by a rain garden? Or is that driveway just sheeting right down into the street? And if you wanted to put a rain garden in, you have to put in a curb or a speed bump or something to shunt that water to the left or to the right. So just take a rough look at both the slopes and the sizes of your roof, where your downspouts are located, and the sloping of your property if you're looking to capture any of that non-roof runoff. Once you've got a rough idea of which areas are draining where, then you can get actual numbers. So again, I'm using the Fairfax County GIS mapping. Almost every jurisdiction has their own version of it, and we have those URLs pasted on the sheet that Rebecca sent out with your email, registration email, confirmation email. I'm going to do it for my property. I don't actually live at 123 Fake Street, but you basically, for any of these maps, there's going to be a search bar somewhere, and you put your address in there, hit enter, and it's going to zoom in on your property. This is my actual roof though. So now I'm looking at my roof. I've already done the basics. I know generally which areas drain to which downspout. Now I need to find out what the actual square footage is. The nice thing about almost all of these mapping applications now is that there's a little draw feature, a little measure feature, and you can draw a box around the area of roof that's draining to downspout 1, 2, or 3 and figure out what that square footage is. If in the off chance you aren't able to find where that is on your jurisdiction's mapping, or if it doesn't allow it, Google Maps is great as well too. You can do this on Google Maps. Sometimes it's a little harder to see on Google Maps if the trees are out and they might be covering part of your roof, but generally you can still get it pretty accurately on Google Maps as well. I know after I've done my little survey that I've got 3 downspouts, 1 in the back of the house, 2 in the front. But also on this mapping, I can look up topo lines and resource protection areas. Now, I really didn't have to look up topo lines. I know there's a really steep slope in my backyard, but this is showing me that there's a really steep slope. So I could put a rain garden there, but it's going to be harder to build because I'd have to put one of those big berms down on the downhill side, cut out a lot of soil on the uphill side to create a flat surface. So it's already more difficult. And I find that actually I have a resource protection area because there's a little creek in my backyard. And that resource protection area actually extends basically to the peak of my roof. So basically that's telling me that the backyard is not a good spot for a rain garden. I can't really put in a rain garden in an RPA. And even if I wanted to, it would be very hard to build because of the slope. So that limits it basically to the front 2 downspouts. They're just outside of the resource protection area, and my front yard is pretty flat. So if I wanted to put a rain garden in there, I could legally do it. I wouldn't have to get special permission from the county. And I wouldn't have to do a lot of intensive grading and reshaping of the land to create that flat surface for the rain garden. So let's look at those 2 areas on the front that are being drained by my 2 downspouts. I use the measuring tool on this software, and I find that downspout 2 is draining the main roof, about 427 square feet. Downspout 3 is draining a smaller area of roof, about 207 square feet. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to bump that up to 430 square feet and 210 square feet, although you can use those exact numbers if you want. I take those numbers and I plug them into my sizing spreadsheet. Here I've added them together. So let's say I want one rain garden that's going to capture both of those downspouts. 430 plus 210, 640 is my total drainage area, impervious drainage area. We've got a very small front yard. I'm not going to bother trying to capture any of the runoff from the front yard because there's just not much to begin with. So I'm just sizing this rain garden to capture the runoff from my roof. So I put 0 in for my total pervious drainage area. I'm not going to bother with the front yard. Just capturing roof runoff. Our design storm is a standard 1 inch. This can be changed though if you wanted to do something smaller or even larger. That means the spreadsheet is calculated that for that 640 square feet of roof during a 1 inch storm, it's creating 50.67 cubic feet of runoff. Cubic foot is significantly larger than a gallon. I think it's about 20, I forget, 7 gallons, something like that. It's a lot. 7.5 gallons. So multiply that by 7.5. I won't do that math in my head, but 300 or so. Then you can put in optionally what you think your depths might be, and you can play around. So I'll say I'm going to put in 2 inches of mulch, 9 inches of ponding depth, and my soil infiltration rate was good. So I'm going to use amended soil. Just keep the natural soil in place, amend it with compost. And I'm going to put in 12 inches of amended soil, meaning I'm taking 3 inches of compost and tilling it into the top 12 inches of soil. What is my rain garden going to be if I use those depths? And, oops, the spreadsheet will kick it out for you. It's going to be just slightly over 100 square feet. Well, 380 gallons. Okay, so 50.67 cubic feet is 380 gallons. So it's a good amount of rain from a 1 inch storm. And to capture that 380 gallons, I need 100 square foot rain garden, slightly bigger than 100 square feet. I live in a townhouse. I don't really have that much space. I've got a couple trees in the front yard too. So 10 by 10, that's probably going to be a little too much for what I was looking for. So what are my other options? Well, let's say I did my infiltration test, and even though I had a rate that was fast enough for an amended soil rain garden, what happens if I just build an excavated soil rain garden? That's a deeper rain garden. It requires more excavation, but it holds more water per square foot. So try it again. 640 square feet, same drainage area. We're still using 1 inch. It's still the same treatment volume, 50.67 cubic feet, 380 gallons. Still going to have 2 inches of mulch, 6 inches of ponding. But instead of amended soil, let's say, just for the sake of argument, I decide to do this excavated rain garden. I put in 18 inches of soil media and 9 inches of gravel bed underneath. What is that going to create? Well, to store that same volume, I only need 43 square feet of rain garden. So I'm digging down deeper, but it's making the footprint smaller because it's storing more volume per square foot of rain garden. So this probably will cost me more just because it's a more extensive, there's more material to buy, you have to dig down deeper, but I can fit that rain garden in a much smaller space and store the same amount of volume as that 100-foot amended soil rain garden. So sometimes even when people have good infiltration rates, sometimes they do opt for the excavated soil rain garden just because it usually takes up less space. But this is a nice thing, if even that was too big, I could say, well, what happens if I put in 24 inches of soil media and 12 inches of gravel? You'll see the deeper you go, the smaller that footprint will get. The shallower you go, the larger that footprint's going to be. So you can really play around, monkey around with the numbers and see what will fit in your property. Once I've found out what I want on the top, I put in the depths, I found something that works for me size-wise, you'll see that the bottom half of the spreadsheet, which is the materials, will automatically start populating. So here, the depths are the same that I entered up at the top. So this is for our amended soil rain garden. It said it was going to be slightly over 100 square foot surface area there. It's 101.33. I said it was going to be 6 inches of ponding, 2 inches of mulch, 12 inches of amended soil. And because I'm using amended soil, it means I'm using no soil media or gravel. It'll calculate the total excavation depth for you, 9.5 inches. This is showing you you're going to have to dig down 9.5 inches if you want a rain garden that's going to have 6 inches of ponding, 2 inches of mulch, and 12 inches of amended soil. So that shows you what your total depth of excavation is going to be. And then it shows you volumes that you're dealing with in cubic yards. So if I had that 100 square foot rain garden, and I wanted to put 2 inches of mulch on the top, that means I'd have to buy about 0.6 cubic yards of mulch in order to create that 2-inch layer over 100 square feet. For amended soil, I'd need about 0.94 cubic yards. We have 12 inches of amended soil, but you create that by adding in 3 inches of compost and mixing it into the top 12 inches of soil. So what it's doing is calculating 3 inches of compost times 100 square feet. How much cubic yards of compost do you have to buy? Just slightly less than 1 cubic yard in this case. So the nice thing is it gives you all of your numbers, and it even tells you how much soil you will be excavating how much spoil you're going to be creating. Almost 3 cubic yards. Do you know what you're going to do with that? Do you have spots on your property where you can spread it around? Can you put some of that into a berm? If you don't have space for it, you're going to have to get that hauled away. So that's going to be an expense as well too. So now you've got your numbers. And from there, this is homework that you have to do on your own. You figure out what your unit price is going to be. So I know I need 0.63 cubic yards of mulch. Well, if I go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Merrifield Garden Center, how much does it cost? And sometimes you do have to do a conversion. Oftentimes they don't sell a fraction of a cubic yard. You might have to buy one, or you might have to go and get those smaller bags, which come in cubic feet and such like that. So there is some converting that you might have to do, but at least they'll give you a pretty good idea of the volume you need. And then you can go find pricing and figure out what your pricing is going to be so you can figure out your costs. And then finally, what you'll notice is obviously it's 0 right now because you do have to do that homework yourself and figure out what those unit prices are going to be for the materials that you'll need. But if you can find those out, then the spreadsheet will also calculate what your actual costs are going to be. I will say that this stuff down at the bottom, your other materials, under drain, inflow, outflow, pre-treatment, clean out pipes, filter fabric plants, this spreadsheet isn't really well suited to figuring out those costs because those costs can get pretty complicated, especially with plants. You might be putting 40 or 50 plants in there. We've only got one line on here for plants. This stuff is really good for finding a bulk material and the cost of the bulk material. It's not so great for those other costs, the structural things, the plants and stuff. We do add it on there. If you want to throw it in, you can. But oftentimes these costs are a little more complicated. You probably have to do some calculations on your own, but it's there just so you're sort of aware that when you are calculating out costs, don't forget to include those other costs as well too, not just the cost of the soil, the amendments, the mulch. And then finally, once you do have all those costs, again, the spreadsheet will calculate your final cost for you. So you can at least get a pretty good estimate of what your budget should be for such a project. Once you figured out the size of your rain garden and the volumes of materials you're going to be working with, that's when you decide on what tools you need. And again, big pickup truck will hold about 1 to 2 cubic yards of material. So that can give you a rough idea when we're talking cubic yards, because it's not something you necessarily use on a daily basis. If it's 1 or 2 cubic yards, that's probably a wheelbarrow job. If it's 5 or 6 cubic yards, you might have to start thinking about, renting a pickup truck or hiring a contractor to do all the work, or maybe just a contractor to haul in the materials for you. Okay, almost done here. Based on the volumes of materials you're going to need, you can figure out how you're going to do your excavation too. Do you need to go rent a mini excavator? Do you need to hire a contractor with a full-size excavator? Or is this something, again, that's in that 1 to 2 cubic yard range that you could probably do with a couple friends and some shovels? So there's a lot of materials that you potentially could use, but I think the sizing spreadsheet will kind of give you the rough idea of whether this is something you can do as a homeowner, DIY on your own, or whether you're going to need some extra help, or whether you just hand it all off to a contractor and let the professionals handle it. Again, for those poor soil sites, you still have options. You don't have a suitable placement for your rain garden, or if you do, but you find the soil is poor there, it's just not well suited, or if you have both of those things, poor soil and poor placement, the above ground rain garden is a solution for you, a potential solution. And you would size it just the way you size any other rain garden. You would figure out the square footage of that container that you're using, the various depths of the layers that were in that container, and from there you can figure out how big of an above ground rain garden you need in order to capture that 1-inch storm. It's a little bit different though, because obviously these containers kind of come in standard sizes. So oftentimes what you'll find is you use a sizing spreadsheet to figure out how much space you'll need. Maybe it's 40 square feet, and you figure out, oh, the containers are only 20 square feet, so I'm going to need to connect 2 of those together. This is the above ground rain garden that I just showed in the construction process. So you can see it's just the same layers that we would use in an excavated rain garden. There's the drainage gravel down below. They actually put a second layer of gravel, pea gravel in this case, to kind of act as a filter to make sure that fine sediment didn't get down into that chunkier gravel down at the bottom. There is an under drain pipe, which you can see in that first photo there too. That's the perforated pipe at the bottom to allow excess water out. And then they layer the mulch, the planting soil, the mulch, and then the plants on top. So it is just a regular rain garden, except instead of in ground, it's built inside of this container. Yeah. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. This one was pretty close to the house because it was such a small property that we did say, put a liner, an impermeable liner down on the bottom and have an under drain. So it's sending the overflow further away from the house. Because what they were trying to do, they had some flooding issues. The yard was sloped towards their back door. They wanted to get that water away, but they wanted to filter it before it did. So this was a means of filtering it. And then the under drain pipe was a means of getting that excess water to drain away from the house. Once you got everything built, what about maintenance? There's a lot more to maintenance than just this, but I'm going to go through it very quickly and keep it kind of simple. You want to observe your rain garden during and after big storms. Sometimes you'll see there's a little bit of erosion where your downspout pipe comes in. Maybe that means you have to add a little bit more gravel. Sometimes there's a little bit of erosion where the water escapes as well too. Maybe you need to add a few more rocks and a few more gravels there as well too. Sometimes you'll find that there's a little bit of sediment that builds up on the surface after those big storms. You can just scrape that off with a shovel. You want to verify that the rain garden drains within about 48 hours. You don't want to see water on the surface after 2 days. That means probably something, if not clogging, is percolating very slowly underneath. If there's erosion at the inflow, in the outflow, or in the berm, again, usually the easiest thing to do is to add stone. Just add some rock to protect that soil underneath to make sure that that erosion doesn't get worse. Sometimes you do have to water your plants, especially if you're using this rain garden soil media, because it is about 70 to 85% sand. The first time that you put your plants in, you might have to water them for the first month or two until they get established. Sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes it's necessary. You want to keep weeds out, so just observe it and make sure that the invasives don't get in there and take over. Replace any plants that don't survive. You do want a nice, dense plant growth in there because those living roots are extracting water. They're helping the soil filter pollutants as the rainwater passes through. Sometimes during big storms, mulch will wash off. Sometimes it'll float. So you do need to go in and replenish it every now and then. And then again, remove sediment buildup. So if you see sediment building up in any certain spot, just go in with a shovel and scrape it off so that it doesn't start building up even further and potentially causing a clogging hazard. That's about it. So that's my information. If there's any questions that come up afterwards, I actually do have to run, unfortunately, afterwards. I usually stick around for Q&A, but I do have to run today for another event. But please take down my email, take down my phone number, and if you have a question that comes up about design or construction or any of that, send it my way. I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Wow, 12 p.m. on the dot. Pretty impressed with our timing this year. For those online, thanks for sticking around. We will be sharing all these presentation slides probably on each of our respective websites. We would also love to have any feedback from this event. So if you are online within your registration confirmation email, there is a link to a Google form for feedback. For those in the room, if you picked up an agenda, on the second page there is an evaluation form. This is helpful to hear what we could do better, but also there's a space if there's something else that you're interested in learning about. This is a great opportunity for us as well. So lastly, this has been recorded. This will be added to NVRC's YouTube page and our website following the event. But if you have any further questions, we will be sticking around, or feel free to shoot us an email. We love to talk about rain gardens any time of day, any day of the week. So thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of this looks really beautiful day. So I hope you enjoy it. Stop sharing, recording.